Finally, she moved to Centerville and lived with her daughter's family for the last 25 years of her life. Winona's massive contribution to family history work brought gospel ordinances to many, but also touched the lives of her posterity, some of whom have memories of helping with microfilm reading and hearing family stories. Her love and involvement with family on both sides of the veil brought spiritual depth to her life and established a legacy that lives in her 400 and counting descendants and is exemplified in the 99 missions and dedicated church and family service of her progeny. A few quotes from Winona's grandchildren and children illustrate the impact of this great lady. About genealogy work, Merlin wrote, "As I helped her research our ancestors, I discovered my connection and place in the circle of life. To her, ancestors were very much alive, and I thought she was very close to them." Her son Marion wrote, "The St. George years for mother were like the rest of her life, years of service to others as she provided a home for her mother in her last years, a home away from home for nieces going to school, a good neighbor to all around her, and most important to me, a home of love and warmth and faith and testimony for a teenage son trying to chart the directions of his life in those important years." Jeff said, "She was a pioneer woman in real life. She was a living, walking heritage." Phil said, Jeff said that was what Phil said. Jeff said she was a protector. She expected you to work hard and behave yourself. Merlin said, "Every night I would go down to the cold basement room and there would be a hot water bottle at the end of the bed. I was grateful for that. She was very tender and kind." About her handiwork, Winona's daughter-in-law Mabel wrote, "She was thrifty with her time and talents and seldom went anywhere without her bag of handiwork." Christine said, "She crocheted prolifically. She was always crocheting something." Nancy said, "I learned a lot of sewing by starting with stitching quilt blocks on her treadle sewing machine." Laurie said, "I remember her always busy, hardworking hands, whether it was cross stitch, crocheting, making cereal bars, or writing letters and cards." Jared said, "My memories of those Afghans. I still have mine she made for me, and if you look carefully, you will find long black hairs." Phil wrote, "Grandma loved to learn and encourage learning in others." Jana asked, "Why did we really care about school? I really think it was our grandmother's influence on us. I would just like to pay Grandma homage for passing to my brothers and sister the desire to learn and get an education." Carolyn wrote, "Grandma loved the written word, the gospel, and the wisdom of great thinkers, poets, and statesmen. Her sharp mind was constantly fed during her many lonely hours. Even though she never realized her dream of being a school teacher, she did not let her failures quench the fire for knowledge that burned within her. It was upon her lap that I learned to read and have the magic of knowledge opened up for me. She instilled in me a desire to do my best in school and to love to read." Karen said, "Grandma knew much about current events. Grandma was amazing. If you needed to know something, she knew it. She was brilliant." Greg said, "Grandma knew about politics. She wanted to know about that. She would give me a kind of priesthood interview. She wanted to know if I was being a good boy and being a good father and a good grandson. And then she always had things to share with me that I treasure. I have in my office today a box of most of the little clips that she would send to me while I was a missionary and while at BYU. I did a lot of listening when I was there with her, and she would tell me about her days as a child and about growing up and how much she missed Will." Farron said about her letters, "Those letters were cherished. Grandmother's letters were personal, just for me." Laurie said, "Her letters to me always included her testimony and faith and snippets of wisdom and advice." Her grandson John, after talking about letters when he was in military training, said, "I will tell you, she is quite a lady. When you consider all the adversity and challenges she had in her life, she spent all of her time looking outward to others and what she could do to bless your life. And I'm just so grateful for her example and her love." Oh boy, it made a difference for me. Phil wrote, I will always remember seeing Grandma's effort to be modest and well-dressed. I was impressed as she combed her beautiful black hair. Both Jared and Laurie remembered her brushing her long black hair. Jana wrote, "What kind of legacy does a lonely widow leave whose husband died so many years previously, who had only a few rooms in her daughter's basement that she shared with her teenage grandsons, who walked up and down a steep hill to take the bus to do family history, who canned fruit, washed dishes, and baked bread, who read the scriptures and made scrapbooks for her grandchildren. What kind of impact could such a woman have on 7 young, impressionable minds day after day and year after year? The Boyd and Viola Squires children cannot separate their values, their love of learning, and their personal testimonies from that special little woman with long black hair. When people would come to visit Winona, they always left encouraged and uplifted. But to those who were closest to her, it was known she carried inner turmoil. The hardship and heartache of her life had left her with an inner burden. For this ultimate challenge in her life, she was able, with the help of her daughter Viola, to apply the atonement of her Savior and become completely free and happy. Watching this transformation was a great lesson to her family in application of gospel principles. When Winona died, December 21st, 1984, at age 92, she was honored with 2 funerals, one in Salt Lake City and then one in Bunkerville, where she was buried in Bunkerville next to her husband and among many family members whose lives of faithfulness and sacrifice for the cause of Zion have no finer example than this sweet mother, sister, and daughter, A. Winona Earl Whitwer.
Very good. That was a brilliant and a very wonderful summary of Aunt Winona's family and the way she was. I remember visiting the old ranch in Las Vegas and having my mother and Aunt Nettie and Aunt Winona working together, making handmade soap, handmade bars of soap that they used to make over a fire, etc. Anyway, thanks for that brilliant, wonderful, full report, Nancy. We
have to thank Lauren. Lauren wrote that.
Okay, we'll thank Lauren too. Thanks to all of you. Next, we have Aunt Vida Hardy, and we have the presentation will be from, let's see, Rebecca. Is it Rebecca?
It's Rebecca Smith. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, okay. Rebecca, thanks. It's your turn.
Okay, thank you. And mine was just like the previous one. My sisters are so close and we have learned so much from them. The stories are beautiful. Well, I'll try and get mine in 10 minutes too. I'm Rebecca Hardy Smith. I'm the granddaughter of Merlin and Vida Hardy. And I'm sure grateful to have this opportunity to speak about our pioneer ancestors. And I think we're all special just being in this magnificent family. The Lord has chosen us. I really do believe that. I'll tell you about my grandma, Vida Adelia Earl, who was the daughter of Joseph Ira Earl and Elethra Callista Bunker. And I want to say, I hope she and Vida and Merlin get a pass up in heaven so they can be here to listen to this. And I hope, let me add, all those ancestors we're honoring today. I hope they get to be here and watch this and see how much we love them. Let me just tell you a little bit about Vida's husband, Merlin, first, because I want you to understand the context here. He was the first child born to Heber and Betsy Levitt Hardy, and he was a serious boy, very composed. He would wear a nice suit, tie, and hat, and he had a beloved watch and chain that he wore to church. And one thing special is he was particularly noted for his kindness and dedication to his mother, Betsy Levitt. And even after marrying Vida, he would take his mother, Betsy, everywhere he went on trips, and she spent much time in their home. So you can see the closeness Vida and Merlin had with his mother, which shows, I believe, that it's a sign of a good and righteous man who loves his mother so much. And the reason I tell about him is because I want to tell you a story about Vida and Merlin's romance. And at some point in their youth, Merlin met and fell in love with our beautiful long-haired Vida Adelia Hardy. Vida was a very busy, no-nonsense lady. She had more important work to do than dilly-dally, which is her word, around with romantic nonsense. And so she went off to school. She was well educated. She got work teaching school. She decided to go away to college and study nursing and became a compassionate nurse and a great lifesaver to all her family during illnesses. In the meantime, both she and Merlin were getting older, and Vida was rarely around. However, Merlin patiently waited for her, and he said he wanted no other girl. And eventually, Vida came home from nursing, and Merlin took her on a date. And he picked her up and took her for a lovely buggy ride. But to his dismay, Vida brought along a book to read and paid no attention to Merlin and his conversation. And Merlin got very upset about this. And he stopped the buggy, turned it around, and he took her home. And he firmly told her that he can't take a girl for a ride in his buggy if all she does is sit there and read a book. And so evidently at some point they must have made up. We know that eventually Vida became his. They married in the St. George Temple on January 6, 1925. Vida was 29 years old at the time and Merlin was 32, so he waited for her. Shortly after getting married, they moved to Las Vegas, Nevada. Merlin was able to get steady work as a custodian for the school district during the Depression years when so many people went hungry. During their short life together, they had 3 wonderful sons, Scott Hardy, Martin Hardy, and Richard Hardy. All 3 boys were just as honest, hardworking, brilliant, and God-fearing as their parents. I see a nodding, and it's true. Sadly, Merlin died of heart problems in October 1942 at the young age of only 50 years old. Merlin was known as a good, steady, honest man who always was a defender of the church and his country. When he died, poor Vida was heartbroken, and she kept writing letters to him long after his death. Fortunately, Grandma was strong-willed and was able to continue on with a wonderful, industrious life. This is because she had been raised as a pioneer in Bunkerville in Nevada in 100-degree heat. They had no electricity, and water had to be carried from the river for cooking and bathing. Vida lived in a polygamous family with 16 other children. Out of necessity, Vida became a mother to her younger brothers and sisters. She bathed and dressed them, washed clothes in a big outdoor tub, and cooked and cleaned at a very young age. This explains Vida's obsession with cleaning that went with her throughout her entire life. I recall her excitement when she was able to buy her first vacuum cleaner. It was her favorite possession and she used it constantly. She was very strict about cleanliness. I also recall back in Las Vegas when it was just a young city, Vida kept a dustpan and broom in her car. Whenever she saw glass out in the streets, she would stop the car, jump out, and sweep it up. Can you imagine somebody doing that in Las Vegas today? Grandma Vida also loved education. She never stopped learning and reading. She insisted all her grandchildren do the same. She would pay us a quarter to memorize lists of vocabulary words from the Reader's Digest. I recently learned that Susan Soothall had the same experience when Vida did the same thing for her. One of the best things Vida did for me, although I didn't appreciate it at the time, was work as a secretary because of my excellent typing skills and word training Vida had given me. She never lived to see the benefits of what she did for me, and I look forward to thanking her in the next life for this. When my father, Scott Hardy, died at the early age of 36 of a sudden heart attack, Vida came out to help mother with the children. My mother, Miriam, had 6 children and a 7th one in the womb when he died. We were very poor, Grandmother drove out to our house early in the morning to help the boys with their paper routes, and she was there in the evening to help me hand wash and dry all the dishes for our big family at the end of the day. I can't begin to tell you what a magnificent woman Vida was. If anyone had a problem, she was there lickety-split, and that's another one of her words, lickety-split. Grandma Vida was very colorful. She wore beautiful dresses and encouraged me to dress femininely. I recall her telling me when I was in high school that I should get myself a pink dress. She said I should always wear a pink floral dress. Beautiful flowers lined her walkway to her home. Her handmade quilts were everywhere. I still have one hanging on my wall under glass. I watched her make beautiful rag rugs, and she even made homemade soap. She always had cookies and ice cream in her fridge when we children came. Grandma's house was always felt comforting and safe. Grandma Vida went on to live another 32 years after Merlin died. Fortunately, she had rooms that she rented out so that she could continue to live comfortably. Although she was very careful and frugal with her money, she did not hesitate to give out to those who needed help. The Lord blessed her for this, and as a result, she was able to travel extensively in her later years. She mostly traveled with her dear sisters. They went to the Holy Lands with Cleon Skousen as their guide. They also went to Egypt, and we have pictures of her riding on a camel with her skirt hiked up so you could see the tops of her nylon stockings. She saw Mexico, Alaska, Canada, and the fair in Seattle. On one of her trips back east, she took me as her companion. We went to visit Uncle Martin and Aunt Kathy. While there, Vida took me to see the Naval Academy in Annapolis and other historical sites, and it was a most memorable trip. Vida died quickly on June 26, 1974, of a stroke in Las Vegas. It was heartbreaking for us all. I can't even begin to express my great love for her. She was my favorite person in the whole world. No other woman has ever worked so hard to help others. Dozens of her family members have written and documented stories about our famous and lively Vida and the impact she had on all of our lives. Everyone who knew her loved her. When she smiled, her eyes twinkled. She had the ability to command respect and evoke love at the same time. Everything she did was motivated by goodness and love. Vida and Merlin left behind a great posterity. At this date, there are 149 descendants and more coming. As a family, we tend to be an exceptionally well-educated, hardworking, God-fearing people. I will not mention all of our successful careers and many missionary labors, but I will say that from what I see, we as a group have given ourselves in service to the Lord. We have held almost every calling in the ward and stake, and we currently have one person, Matthew Hardy, my brother, who is now a patriarch for the Lord. We have all been immensely blessed to have been descendants of Vida and Merlin Hardy. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. Brilliant, wonderful report.
Thank you, Rebecca.
We learned a lot, and we are always inspired by the lives and examples of these that have gone on before us. We lived in Las Vegas, my 4 years of high school. We lived just 3 blocks from Aunt Vida and her 3 sons. And Martin was in my same class and was our class president. And so I had a closer relationship with him. But I knew Richard and Scott very, very well. So thanks again. Everything very much appreciated. Thanks for your work on this. Now, we will pass on. We're right on schedule. Uncle Milton, let's see. We have Janice, your son, Doug. Is that correct, Janice? Is Doug going to speak for you?
Yes,
Okay,
Oh, yeah,
thanks.
there he is. See, he's raising his hand.
Oh, there.
I'm
Okay,
I'm right here. I'm right here.
We're still looking at
Thanks.
Janice.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks.
You bet.
You've got the microphone.
Okay, thank you. I am Douglas Whipple. I am the son of Irvin and Janice Earl Whipple. I am the oldest grandson of Milton and Irma. My mother has done this research for this Earl presentation, but has asked me to deliver it. Milton Sylvester Earl was born on May 17th in Bunkerville, Nevada in 1895. He was the 10th child of his father, Joseph Ira Earl, and the third child of his mother, Viola Bunker. Milton lived to be 98 years old. As an artist, with my time today, I'm going to paint a portrait of who Milton S. Earl was, use some of the highlights of his life that are meaningful to his family. To start off with, you know you're a descendant of Milton if you watch basketball games and turn down the sound in the fourth quarter to keep your exuberance under control. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you talk about your potato crop by saying, yep, we had some potatoes the size of a pea, and then there were some small ones. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you have a fascination with bees and love honey. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you have a huge stockpile of ice cream in your freezer and milk in your refrigerator. You know you're a descendant of Milton if your way is the Lord's way. Milton showed great devotion and service to God when, after his military service in the Army, he served a mission in the Southern States Mission. A quick little brushstroke in my portrait, 60 of Milton's descendants have served missions. Milton and Irma were married in the St. George Temple after his military and missionary service were completed. She waited and supported him. He was then called to be the stake clerk of the Moapa stake and served for 17 years. Another little brushstroke here is when he was released, someone in Salt Lake said, "Brother Earl, we're so sorry to see you go. We just got used to reading your handwriting." He then served as the bishop of the Overton Ward for 7 years. He was then asked to be the scoutmaster. And another one of my little brushstrokes here, 42 of his descendants are Eagle Scouts. He served on the stake high council. Then he became a temple ordinance worker in the St. George Temple. For 3 years. After this, he was to be a counselor in the temple presidency. He served for 10 years, 3 years with one president and 7 years with another. Irma died at this time, and Milton stayed another 10 years in St. George and worked in the temple. And another brushstroke, all 5 of his children were presidents, either stake presidents or Relief Society presidents. When he came back to Las Vegas, to live, he was a home teacher and he volunteered at Deseret Industries. I want to tell a sweet story about how Milton and Irma started their courtship. Milton was part of a committee in high school for the back to school dance. Irma had come with her sister from Littlefield, Arizona, to live in Bunkerville to go to school. When Milton and Irma talked, the conversation went something like this. "Irma, I bet you wouldn't be going to the dance with me because you'll probably have another date." She replied by saying, "I bet you won't be going with me because you'll have another date." They both and held the money. They both lost the bet. together. They went together to the dance, and Lillian kept the $2. This was the beginning of a long and wonderful courtship. Here are some more descendant checkups for you. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you will sit on the roof of a member's house with your missionary companion on preparation day, stockings, and Babe Ruth play baseball. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you agree that those who marry into the family have made us better. Next, I have a story when Lee, Milton's oldest child, came back from World War II. After 3-year service as a Marine. Another brushstroke here, 10 of Milton's descendants served in the military. Lee rode the bus to Las Vegas, where he called a couple of uncles to get him from Las Vegas to Overton. This was kind of tough because of the rationing of gas. Uncle Joe Wendell was the one who drove Lee home. As they got closer, they could see Milton working in the field, but he didn't know Lee was on his way home. It was told by Richard Wells, a 12-year-old cousin riding in the car, that Milton recognized Lee, dropped everything, and ran across the field to greet and hug Lee. My brothers, 20 cousins, and I know that Grandpa would have dropped everything, ran to welcome us also. One more story about Milton and his sons. Milton, Claire, who was 12, who had recently received the Aaronic priesthood, and Gary, who was 10, were working on the farm disking a field. Milton had a bishop's responsibility and needed to leave. He left Claire and Gary to finish the disking. In the process of finishing up, the disc had run over Gary's foot and injured him. Claire pulled Gary over to the irrigation ditch to clean the wound. They both realized how serious it was. Claire knelt down and gave Gary a priesthood blessing, and then said he was going to run to the neighbors down the road to telephone his mother to locate his dad. Soon Milton did arrive with one of his counselors. Before they lifted Gary into the car, the counselor said, "Bishop, shouldn't we give him a blessing?" Milton said, "No, Claire has already done that. We just need to get Gary to the hospital." When they arrived in Las Vegas, the attending doctor was not encouraging, but he said he would do what he could. Gary spent a good part of the summer in the hospital. Eula May was working in Las Vegas at Ronzoni's to earn money for college, and after work, she would walk to visit Gary. Miraculously, Gary's foot healed, and even the doctor said, it really was nothing that my medical skill had done. A little bit of a brushstroke here also is when Gary was released from the hospital, there were dried peas in the nightstand drawer next to his bed. Because he didn't like peas, he had dumped them in the drawer. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you're scheduling your life into your 90s. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you stay after church activities and events to put all the chairs away. You know you're a descendant of Milton if you answer questions by saying, "It's just how you like it." Here are some things that Milton's grandchildren have said about him. He showed his love by sharing his garden produce. He was a hard worker and a smart worker. He loved his family, and he was proud and anxious to introduce his grandchildren to his friends. The only living of his 5 children, Janice, has this to say: Milton is a special son, brother, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Milton is best remembered for his immense integrity, incredible work ethic, patience, kindness, reliability, and devotion to family. Here are Milton's own words from his journal. I have an abiding and strong testimony that the gospel has been restored to the earth through the prophet Joseph Smith. That is the Lord's work. That is the Lord's work, and eternal life can be our greatest reward if we but live the commandments and keep the covenants we have all made in order to return and live with our Heavenly Father. Each of our children have wonderful families, and we love them and our grandchildren dearly. All 285 of Milton's descendants love him. As Lee Earl said at Milton's funeral, a good man.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We really appreciate that report. And that's both Doug and Janet. I would like to add one point. Uncle Milton and Irma were a great influence in my young life, and President Milton, my uncle, married Helen and myself in the St. George Temple. So we have a personal connection that goes way, way back. Thanks again. Another brilliant report. I'm so proud of all of you cousins. Thanks. And this is just great. Now we have, we're on schedule, and we will go to, let's see, Jim Daines. He will represent the Ken Earl family. And I want to make sure that everybody knows again that the entire family and all descendants now and forever will be blessed because of the Ken and Ludine Earl two-volume history. It's very much of a treasure to all of us. And I think more than any one single thing, it ties the family together now and forever. So thanks. Jim, we'll turn to you.
Okay, well, my report probably isn't near as polished as those who went before me, and I appreciate everything that they have said. Kenneth Earl was born in 1897, and he worked hard all of his life. He struggled with some health problems throughout his life, but he always worked hard. Mom said she used to see her father when he was coming back from doing the chores, sit down on the back step and just curl up, holding his stomach from the pain that he was in, and he'd get it under control and then come in the house, but never complained about it. He married Verdi Levitt when they lived in Bunkerville. Story about them is that he won a foot race. He didn't have the money to buy her a ring, and so he entered a foot race and won the foot race. And if I remember right, it was a $5 purse that he won, and with that he purchased a ring and asked her to marry him. He and Grandma worked hard all their lives. When they had 3 children, Grandpa was called on a mission and served in the eastern United States. It was a 6-month mission, and he left his family with his brother-in-law, who he and his brother-in-law were in business together, and they and his brother-in-law ran the farm, took care of the little grocery store that they had. Took care of everything for that 6 months while Grandpa went on a mission. And they had a grocery store there in Bunkerville, and my mom said that they used to go down and you could get candy for eggs, and so you go down and get for so many eggs, so much hardtack candy, and she had fond memories of growing up there. A lot of hard work. They didn't have the conveniences like we have today. Every time I hear kids complain about how hard it is, sometimes I have to pause and bite my lip because they don't know what hard is. Neither do I. But our ancestors did. Grandpa Earl was a scriptorian, and there was no middle of the ground for him. If he was in a priesthood meeting or a Sunday school meeting and there was an opposing view to something that was being taught, when Kenneth Earl stood and set the record straight of what the doctrine was or what the principle was, the discussion was over because he knew the gospel. As told by my Uncle Dean and my mother, Anne Marie, Grandpa Earl and his brother were raised at the feet of the prophets, literally. Their father and mother hosted the apostles when they would come to state conference. And at that time, there were 2 apostles that would come to every state conference. And so so Grandpa Earl and his brother would give up their beds so the apostles would have a bed to sleep in, and they would sleep on the floor, and they sat up till the wee hours of the morning asking questions and being taught by the apostles. And he never forgot those lessons. He was honest to a fault with tremendous integrity. He was a hard worker, and he loved the Lord. I was in basic training in the Army when he passed away, and I wasn't allowed to come home to his funeral. But one story that I will tell is that I was there when that happened, and Grandma and Grandpa came to stay with us for a while, and we lived down in Poway, California. Floyd and Alice Packard lived in Carlsbad, and Dean and Laura lived in Poway as well, and Grandma and Grandpa were staying with me, with my parents. And she got up one morning and came in, and my mom came in, and Grandma, Verdi Earl, was up and looked like she hadn't slept a wink. She was very tired. And Mom asked her, "So, Mom, what's wrong? Why are you so tired? What's wrong?" And her mother said, "They came for me last night, and I have been up all night pleading for permission to stay to take care of your father. And when morning time came, she received permission. And so she cared for him for several years after that. And after he passed away, Grandma, who is then, they had moved up to Meridian, Idaho, next to next to the Strassers, next to Wilma and Art Strasser, their oldest daughter. And she came to one of our son's blessings. She came to everything that any of the kids or grandkids had in their lives. She came to the blessing of one of our sons in a sacrament meeting, and I sat down next to her, and we visited a minute, and I said, "Grandma, do you ever feel Grandpa close to you?" And she said, "Oh yes, he visits me all the time." And I always thought, how fitting is that? She pleaded for permission to stay, to care for her love. And I'm sure that he did the same on the other side of the veil for permission to come and comfort his love. Most of the children have passed away now. Most of their children. Dean Earl is still alive. All the rest of their siblings, of their children, have passed on. Aunt Ludine, who is with us today, her husband Ken was the oldest, and we're grateful to have Aunt Ludine here. And Uncle Floyd Packard, was married to Alice Packard, and he's I don't know if he's here or not. I haven't seen him, but he was going to try and be here. And Laura Earl, who's married to Dean, is still with us. And it occurs to me that little by little, as time goes on, as is the way of the Lord, my generation, my cousins, and I are the next generation to enter that stage of life where things begin to look a lot clearer than they did when we were young. So I love my grandparents. I love Kenneth Earl. He was one of my favorite people as I grew up as a boy. Another thing about Grandpa Earl is that when he lived in St. George, he worked in the temple, in the St. George Temple, for a couple of decades before he moved to Meridian. And he had these big two pecan trees that he planted when they moved there. And the last time that I took my family to St. George, those pecan trees were still there, and we gathered pecans because they were dropping pecans. We brought bags of pecans home. And he also had a beautiful grape arbor, and we used to go out and be able to pick grapes off the arbor. And that was on the same side of the house as the pecans. And on the other side of the house, there was a horseshoe pit. And Kenneth Earl loved to play horseshoes. And if there wasn't a partner, he played horseshoes anyway. It was one of his favorite pastimes. And so that's where they lived when I first went to see them. So that's my report.
Well, cousin, we thank you very much. That's a beautiful, wonderful report. You mentioned some names of cousins that we love and remember, the Strassers, and of course, Ken and Ludine. And when I was at BYU, I had no car and was graduating. And when I had a date that was important, I'd go ask Ken if I could borrow his new Packard car. And I appreciated his generosity as well as but the cousins have stuck together over the geography of the world, and we've had beautiful experiences together. So thanks for the report on Kenneth Earl, Uncle Kenneth Earl. And
I wanted to interject just quickly. Jim, I believe that Ken and Bertie's family, I believe you guys get the award for the most number of descendants, because I know that each of their children had at least 8 and up to 14 kids, each one. And I don't know how many are in the 3rd and 4th generations, but if you could tally it all up, that would be great.
I'll do that. I'm sure I can come up with that number. One thing that I think is a wonderful tribute to this family, the Earl family. My parents, when they had their 50th anniversary, we had a celebration at the church. We lived in Cuna at the time, and my parents, we all were in the same ward, and it didn't occur to me until all there's siblings
Well, thanks, Jim.
Hold on, it's not done.
sisters, all of them sitting together with their spouses, and and that's the first time since Mother got married that all her brothers and sisters had been together as a group like that, which was several decades. And it also occurred to me, and this is what means so much to me, Grandma and Grandpa Earl were married over 55 years when he died. Every one of their children who attended that meeting, that celebration of 50 years, every one of them, with the exception of Dean and Laura, who were younger than Mom and Dad, all of them were married well over 50 years. And I thought, what a legacy for all of us.
Great tribute. Wonderful
Yeah.
information. Thank you all for your reports. I will mention the next 4. The date will be April 24th, Sunday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Uncle Marion Earl, Aunt Melba Lewis's family, the Ella Caruth and Ella's family, and Amy Wells's family. Those will be the 4 families that will report. We'll find someone that will be a good volunteer. Those of you who have reported today, you've been a brilliant example of gathering together the information and entertaining us and reminding us of the spiritual links that tie us together now and in the future and forever. Now, do we have anyone else that wants to volunteer anything or ask any questions? We've done very well. We're right on the hour.
Well, I just want to say something really quickly. So in the link, in the little newsletter that I sent with this link, I also included a link to the Earl Family Directory, which keeps growing. And I've only put in up to the 2nd cousins, and I have some 3rd cousins, but it was getting so large that I only kept it at the 2nd cousins. But if your name was at the bottom of that little newsletter that I sent you, and it was in bold, take a look at the directory and you'll see what information is missing from your family. Flora Jones Colton family, Connie Mae Earl Stevens, Vida, Wilma, Larry, Fenton Earl, Anne Marie Earl Danes, Ella Callista Earl Harath, Newell Earl Levitt, and Lee Whitwer. I'm still missing a little bit of information. So if you want to know what information that is, just click on the directory. I have it, it's in green or blue on that little newsletter. It'll pull it up. You can download it, you can print it out, and it would be great to get a complete list of at least the 3 generations. But I have, so far, I have 262 emails for Earl cousins. So
Good.
that's exciting.
Thanks, Elaine. Thanks for everything that you've done.
Brother Will, this is Cheryl Stuckey. I was assigned to do Elethra Earl last time and my phone wouldn't work. But why don't you include
Would you like to
me?
report now?
Well, if you have you got time, I can report now if you've got time.
Yes.
Sure, everyone can, people can leave when they need to. Everyone's welcome to stay on and visit after Cheryl gives her report. I won't turn this off until everyone's gone. So yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Cheryl. That'd be great. I'm so sorry we had technical difficulties last time.
Great idea. Go ahead. You
I've
have the
been
mic.
assigned to do Elethra Callista Earl. Now, Callista Earl was born, died 2 months before I was born. So I didn't ever get to know her personally, but we've named our children down through the ages after her. She left a great impression on my older sibling. She was born in Bunkerville, Nevada on November 1st, 1882. And she lived in Bunkerville when she married my father, Emerald Lane Cox. And then when he was 4, they moved to St. George and lived the rest of the time here in St. George. A lot of people have told me that I remind them somewhat of Elethra. And that makes me happy to think that maybe those 2 months we had together before she left and before I came, we passed on a little heritage to each other. I wanted to report back that of Elethra's heritage, that we counted up 84 missionaries and 14 bishops and 8 bishops' counselors, 4 stake presidents, and 6 stake president counselors. And 2 of her posterity have taught at the MTC in Provo. And we couldn't remember and count how many Relief Society presidents that we have, but we figured with that many men holding the priesthood and doing well, certainly had a lot of Relief Society presidents in that also.
Fascinating.
So that's all we had on her at this time. I might mention that Frank, Elethra's husband, never married again. She died at 56 in her sleep, had her Sunday lesson all prepared to go, and just didn't wake up. And her youngest son, Harold, was serving a mission in the eastern states at that time, but they didn't want him to leave the mission to come home for her. And he said it always bothered him that he hadn't come home to honor his mother. But we all told him that he honored her by staying true to the mission and preaching the gospel. And that's it.
Well, thank you very, very much. Thanks for giving us that update on the Elethra.
Bob,
Yes, go ahead. So
my name is Scott Earl, and I am Dean's 4th son. And I just wanted to give a quick update on Dean Earl, since he is the last living child of
no, I'm not understanding the question. You understanding?
He's giving it.
my grandpa, which in the hospital again. What was that?
We will get updates
No.
eventually.
He's trying to get an update. Just not a thing, but just on one of the last.
Oh, from 3 months ago?
No, I'm just giving an update of my dad, who is Dean Earl, and Dean Earl, who Jim Daines just talked about.
Yes, go ahead.
He went into the hospital actually at the beginning of January, and he's been in the hospital for a couple of weeks now. And Dean isn't doing so good. They just took him home last week, and And so he's back up at the house in Harpster, Idaho. And in fact, Jim went to see. I met Jim. What was it, last weekend, Jim?
Yeah.
And that was kind of cool because Jim was there talking to my dad, and they were reminiscing, telling stories, and so I appreciate that. But my dad, yeah, he's 80, 81 or 82, one of the two. I think he's 30 years older than me. Anyways, he had quite a few stories to tell, and hopefully he'll get better. Right now he's got pneumonia and he's in the hospital. He just got out today. So yeah, and I think he is the last son. Well, he's the youngest of Kenneth Owen Earl. And so anyways, an update on him. He's on his last leg right now. And so if you have any prayers for him, Dean Earl needs him. You know, he could use a few prayers and a little bit of fasting.
Thanks ever so much. All of us will join in prayers and requesting special blessings for Dean. Thanks for going ahead and adding that postscript. We are all very interested and concerned. Thank you. Anybody else have any update they want to add? Yes. I don't think you're connected to the microphone. I saw your hand was up, but I don't know if we know how to connect.
Unmute yourself.
Oh. Well, you're on my screen, but we don't hear you. Can you talk to him, David? Elaine had to leave. My son David is assisting me now. This is a mystery to me. Can you make it connect to any?
No, he has to unmute it. Sam and Pat, you need to unmute it or press the space bar if you want to speak.
Is that
You
Sam and Pat Wells?
Yes, Sam and Pat Wells.
Very good. Greetings to Sam and Pat.
Oh,
Love you. Wish I knew how to make this thing work.
you can either find the unmute button or you can press the space bar, and while you hold the space bar, you'll be able to speak.
Well, Sam and Pat, while I've got you on this, please give me a call by phone because you're up for next 3 months from now, and Amy Wells, and I would like to have the report from you. So I don't know if I have your phone number, Sam. Hopefully so. Double cousin.
We still can't. Yeah, we can't hear you, Sam. Can you press the space bar and hold it down?
No,
No.
that's not working.
Well, Sam, if you can hear us, Dad says to give him a call. And so I think, is that wrap this up?
And if you need my number, write it down quick, 435-632-0083. I'll repeat it again, 435-632-0083. That's my old St. George number, but it works here in Salt Lake, North Salt Lake.
Or you can contact them through Elaine, and the emails that you have, you can connect that way too.
That's a good way. That's a good way. Thanks, cousins. We love you all. In Spanish, abrazos, besos, cariño, amor, and all good blessings. This has been wonderful. And thanks for those, especially who have made the reports, updating on the family. Thank you
for hosting.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So we leave it open for a while.
Well, I think we'll be disconnecting. Doug Whipple, in your report, were you painting something as you were speaking? And then were you going to show that to us or another time? And I think he dropped off.
Okay.
All right.
And I just make a comment. This is Mildred.
Oh, there's Mildred.
Go ahead.
In Reno?
Yes.
Oh, good, good. Thanks for your
She wants to
hospitality.
make a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment. In putting this together, well, then I realized that it was and I was told it was just the bloodline. But I really just admire the Earls so much because all of the in-laws they're so amazing to me. And all of our
No, what's going
was
on?
to this family. I'm sure all of the other in-laws that are not of the bloodline would have just wonderful memories of all of their ancestors and the cousins. And this is such a great thing to be doing. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mildred. Mildred and Helen, my Helen, went to BYU together and were musicians together.
She was my accompanist, and I was thrilled to have her as a cousin. Great choice.
Mildred says hello to Helen.
And my mom, Helen, says hello to you. She's right here and she says hello.
Now,
We love every one of them. They're so influential in
Goodbye,
my entire
everybody.
family, all of our lives.
I've got to get that.
Thank you.
Can you turn it off?
Okay, I guess we're
Before
disconnected.
you leave, was this recorded? Was this meeting
Yes.
recorded?
It was recorded. You could check with Elaine to be able to access it and see it again.
Because I know she recorded October, so that's good. Thanks.
You bet.
I had people ask me.
But yeah, for those who were able to attend, they could then watch the recording.
Good. Thank you very much. And thanks for doing it.
You bet. Everybody have a wonderful night and all the best.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye for now.
Yes. Oh, Dana Watkins.